When everything looks dark, how do you rise above and overcome adversity? That's the topic of today's Bold and Blunt. And I'm your host, Cheryl Chumley, giving you a Christian conservative look at today's news, politics, culture, and events. Most people you know aren't born into a perfect life. They have much to overcome, much struggle, much adversity, many problems, some of them horrific, right? So if you have a dream in life and you see that dream at a certain point slip away and you think it'll never happen, I'll never achieve what I want, and you're about to give up, then today's story, today's guest has a story that you want to listen to because he is just such a person who has overcome oh so much to go on to become nationally syndicated radio host, TV host, comedy writer, and so forth and so on. And before I get into his story, before I get into the interview with him, I want to quickly mention, if you like Bold and Blunt, you may get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, at washingtontimes.com, where you may also subscribe to my Monday, Wednesday, Friday newsletter. Just go to the bottom of the page, click on the newsletter section, find Bold and Blunt with Cheryl Chumley. That's me. That's my newsletter. And sign up for it. You'll get my commentaries and my Bold and Blunt podcast delivered right to your email box. But you may also get Bold and Blunt at Real Life Network and wherever podcasts are offered. And just one other quick note before I bring in my guest. By the way, his name is Rob Carson. He is a nationally syndicated radio host. His show is called The Rob Carson Show. He hosts What in the World on Newsmax TV. I'm sure you've seen him. And he is a well-known, noted, famous even, right? Comedy writer. I'm going to go ahead and say that. A famous comedy writer. Before I get into my interview with him, listen up. If you look around at the news today, all you see is a financial landscape that's growing more and more dangerous. Yes, not just dark and dismal, but dangerous. And I'm concerned, like I'm sure you are, about my retirement funds. Anyone like me who has retirement funds should be concerned. There's stubborn inflation, soaring interest rates, astronomical debt. And all this works together to drain your retirement account's values, right? And to make matters worse, government is actually targeting 401ks and IRAs with heavy new taxes to pay for, listen up, a social justice agenda. But the good news is there is one little known strategy to protect your financial future. What is it? I'm about to tell you. I'm talking about the Gold IRA from American Hartford Gold. This Gold IRA strategy can shield your wealth from this ongoing economic meltdown. And the best part is this method is tax and penalty free. Analysts predict that gold is set to hit all-time highs. You know this, right? You see this. So if you have retirement funds that you just cannot afford to lose, and who doesn't, who has retirement funds, right? Now is the time to call the only precious metal dealer worthy of trust, American Hartford Gold. They'll show you how to protect your savings and retirement accounts by diversifying your portfolio with physical gold and silver. With the finest products, amazing customer service, and get this, a buyback commitment. American Hartford Gold has a 5-star rating from thousands of reviews and an A+, not just an A, not an A-, an A+ from the Better Business Bureau. And guess what? Tell them I sent you, and they'll give you up to $5,000 of free silver on your first order. That's amazing, right? So call them now. Call 866-525-4680. That's 866-525-4680. Or text BOLD, B-O-L-D, BOLD, to 65532. One more time, 866-525-4680, or text BOLD to 65532. American Hartford Gold. Go bold with gold, right? My guest, Rob Carson. You're going to want to stay for the entire 25 minutes with Rob and hear his story. Rob Carson, thank you so much for being on Bold and Blunt. It is so great to have you here.
Thank you, and I am prepared to be both of those things today.
Excellent. Excellent. I like to hear that. So there's a lot going on in the political world, but I'm more interested right now in your personal story, and we'll get into politics after. You have had an interesting rise to your position. Can you talk a little bit about it?
Well, the position is being a syndicated talk show host and Newsmax TV host. What happened was, been in radio for a number of years, and pardon me, I apologize. I had always been in music radio, and I started writing political satire for Rush Limbaugh about 1989 or so when I got out of college, and I started doing politics, writings then while in music radio, and ultimately I was having a great deal of difficulty getting into talk radio because so many in music radio had already made up their mind about me. So I did get a talk radio gig in Kansas City. They blew me out of the contract 2 years into a 3-year deal because I made too much money. And then I had to sell cars. I had to sell cars for a living to save my marriage and my life. And I did it for 3 years. And one day I get a call from Chris Ruddy from Newsmax, who had seen a video of my podcast that I would do after a day of selling cars, go home after 12 hours and do a video podcast. And he says, "Rob, where have you been?" And I said, "Well, I've been in an abusive relationship with radio for 20 years. And he said, "I want to give you a show." He said, "Your show now is called What in the World is Going On with Rob Carson." He said, "Let's call it Rob Carson's What in the World because it's your show." And he gave me a TV show. Then we decided to do a podcast, an audio podcast. And that was so successful, he said, "Let's launch Newsmax radio division, and you'll be the guy." And so they did that. And we signed on at WCBM in Baltimore about almost 2 years ago. And the first few months, we had ratings that were actually higher than Rush Limbaugh in his last year on the radio.
Wow.
Which, in respect to Rush Limbaugh, he's the greatest talk radio personality in history. But I think it showed to a lot of people that they miss the entertainment factor. They miss something other than just an opinion, and then the rest is history. We've been adding affiliates ever since. I'm doing what I always dreamed of doing, and really have become a fresh voice in talk radio in my 50s.
Well, Rob, go back to what you said about you spent 3 years selling cars. So when you made that decision, which was a family first decision, very, very honorable of you, did it feel like you were delving into dark times, or did you stay optimistic knowing that one day you would realize your dream? Or how did that, just describe the feelings that went with that?
Well, let me tell you, and this is going to get, I don't want to make it heavy or anything, but I think it's necessary to share the story. I had to sell cars. I hated selling cars. My wife told me that she was leaving me, and I said, "Well, what do you want to do?" She says, "You need to get a job in the meantime." And I said, "What do you want to do?" She said, "Sell effing cars." So I have never done anything in my life like that. I've only done radio professionally. Other than that, I did farm work and, all that stuff when I was growing up. So I said, "Okay, fine." I told myself that I'm going to win her back. And so I went to work selling cars. I sold the most cars in the dealership the first month. A few months later, my wife said she was giving me a second chance and not a third. Unfortunately, that was not satisfactory because selling cars is dreadful work for me. I have a thing in my feet called peripheral neuropathy, which is terrible in the wintertime selling cars because you want to cut your feet off. You feel like you'd be better off without your feet.
Ooh.
And so I descended into, depression and drank a lot. Really, ultimately, I had, I'd always been a social drinker, but I began to rely on it a lot. And one day, after, 1,000 nights of praying to God, please heal me or just let me die for the life insurance for my family, because I thought I really was not worth very much to my family, I had a healing. I just stopped drinking one day. It just stopped. It was something that I never experienced. I just was like, nope, done. And it's odd because I've been on several vacations since, and I've never even wanted to taste it. It's like it didn't even exist. So I had something miraculous happen in my life that changed me. And ever since then, and that was 2 years ago, it's just, I can't explain it. I just believe that I was given a gift. But the car sales, the interesting thing about it, I was looking for reasons, why did I have to go through this crap, because I'm a talk show host. And I realize now that it really got me back in touch with my roots, with the struggles that, average Americans make when they're trying to buy groceries and whatnot. And as a radio personality, I won't say that I was rich, but I made a good living. When you're in radio, you get a lot of free stuff, things like that. And when you don't have that, you're living paycheck to paycheck. You're, just trying to scrape by, and it really put me in touch with, where I came from. And so I consider it a blessing to do it. I'm glad I don't do it anymore. It also helped me when I'm negotiating car deals. So, and I learned how to park. I learned how to back cars into parking spaces very well as a car dealer.
Look at all those skills that you wouldn't have had, right?
But, yes, exactly. So,
but seriously,
it's been a long road. It's and it's about you never stop paying your dues in life. Clearly, so. I'm glad it happened, but it was a long and treacherous road.
Seriously speaking, there's a lot that can be learned from what you just described as part of your life journey, because I think there are so many people today growing up who think that they're entitled to have these massive salaries in these high-ranking positions just because they have a college degree, and there is much to be learned from struggle, right? The adversity and overcoming and relying on God.
Oh, yes. Well, you always learn more from a loss than a victory. And, I've been through, you have no idea what I've been through in my life. The last, 40 years of my life, they're selling the cars, losing a job. My mother died. My brother died. I found out that I found my biological family, which is interesting because I've been looking for my biological family. I found my biological family, found that I was given up adoption because my mother was raped. That was pretty crazy. So that was, all of that stuff came down right at the same time. And with my mom, it was like my biological mother, it was like it really threw me off. And I realized what an incredible gift it was, not only for her to give birth, but also to add a quiver or an arrow to the quiver of my pro-life beliefs.
Yes.
Because, I'm the son of someone who was raped, and she had me. So all of that stuff came down, and man, it was like negotiating the Titanic through a patch of icebergs for a while. I wouldn't change anything. I wouldn't want to do it again, but I wouldn't want to change anything because it made me who I am today. It gave me the clarity that I have right now. It's amazing.
Yeah, I think that's interesting when people look back through their lives and have regrets over this and that, because you really have to look at it from a heavenly perspective, right? And if you start removing this negative thing and that negative thing, it may not make you as strong as you are today or capable of the understanding and compassion to help others.
Exactly. I went on vacation with my sister, and she invited her best friend. We went for a couple of days to the Black Hills in South Dakota this last weekend. And her friend her husband died last Christmas Eve. He was a marathoner. He was 65 or so. And he just died on the couch. She was downstairs. And she came to this, and I'm thinking, I don't know. She's a widow, and whatever. And we got there. We had a delightful conversation. She was able to laugh at all of the hardships in her life. And she said to me something that I thought was beautiful and profound. She said, Rob, we all have stuff. We all have stuff. Everybody's got stuff. Don't think you're unique because you have stuff. Don't think that you are somehow the only victim in the world. You've got to remember that stuff, but you got to get past it too. And I just thought it was an amazing, amazing thing for someone who'd lost her life partner. Just as retirement was beginning, just as their lives together were beginning. And so, I always look at my scars and I go, okay, you know what? They're scars. They're pretty cool. I'd rather have all these scars than not have any.
Talk about your faith. When were you raised in the faith? Did this come upon you later in life? How did that come about?
Well, I was raised Catholic. My mother made sure that I was in the front pew at St. Pat's Church every Sunday, an hour early. I'm not a devout Catholic by any means. I respect the faith. I respect the tradition. I have what many would consider, I guess, a Jesuit education, which is foundations of faith, study of faith and theology. Also, they can peacefully coexist with science and philosophy. And so I approach God from a scientific and philosophical kind of realm. And, when I hear people like Bill Maher who are so convinced that, my God, how crazy it is to think that God exists. And I'm like, well, really, Bill, explain to me what a quark is, and then we'll talk. The universe is beyond strange. It's stranger than any belief in a deity will ever be. A deity is believable. I mean, as believable as anything that we see in the universe. We, try to explain all of, like 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom makes water. There's a rule for that.
Yes.
It didn't just happen.
Yeah.
So my faith is very important. I do pray every day. My kids, I've never forced them to go to church because I really don't like church. And it always offends people when I say that. I don't like church. I don't know what it is about it. Sometimes I feel like when I go to Catholic churches, a lot of times I see tired priests there who seem like tenured professors to me, going through the motions. I don't like evangelical faiths because I'm not. I don't fall for that. That song and dance routine. I've seen it all. I've been to all of these churches. I have. I've been to Baptist. I've been to all sorts of churches. It's just not my. It's not what I prefer to do. So I discuss my faith with others. I talk to my kids about faith. I'm unfortunately only a holiday Catholic, but it's something I deal with. Deal with it. If you go to church every week, congratulations. Some people can't.
There's a question I want to ask you that I'm sure a lot of people struggle with. So when you're young and when you're growing up, you have dreams of what you would like to do in life, right? And certain dreams don't go away. And so maybe you feel like that's your life purpose and you pursue it and then you fail and you don't get it right away as you didn't. What is it that keeps you going and pursuing against all odds?
I graduated from Northwest Missouri State University in 1989 with a broadcasting degree. Of all of the people who have been through the broadcast program in Washington, or in Northwest Missouri State, it's a very nice broadcast school, by the way. It's right up there. Nobody has had a syndicated radio show, and most of the people, I think there might be, out of the dozens of people who graduated with me in the broadcast major, I don't think any of them are still doing it. Because if you're going to be an entertainer, and which is what I am, an entertainer, I have an opinion, but I entertain. I try to be a complete entertainer as a comedy writer, on stage, on the microphone, on screen. And it's a tough road to hoe. And unless you are committed to it, you will be drummed out of the industry quickly. I've seen plenty of very talented people, very funny people, who did not have it within them to get kicked in the teeth every day by this industry, get up and say, you know what? I'm not only going to beat you, I'm going to get better because of it. And that's what I have done. And even as I was out there walking that damn parking lot, even that I was out there getting derided by the customers, I'm used to sitting across the table from Dave Chappelle. I'm used to sitting at dinner with Kevin James, okay? And I've never had an ego about it or an attitude. I never have. I've had that beaten out of me by this industry. But when you go from that to going out with your hands frozen and your feet numb, scraping snow off a car you want to sell to somebody that you spend 6 hours trying to convince someone to buy, and they ultimately just say, no, I'm okay, and leave, it can be maddening. And there were times that the only seed that kept me going was the possibility that this Newsmax thing could grow. And then they gave me a podcast, and every day I would do a podcast for Newsmax while selling cars. And every day I hoped and prayed, please let me give up the car thing so I can do this. And that's when Chris Ruddy said, we're giving you a radio gig. And that was almost 2 years ago. And so you have to be relentless. You have to be relentless. I was never going to give up my career. I was almost ready to give up on my life. When I was asking God, heal me or let me die, because I couldn't stop drinking. I couldn't stop. I couldn't. When I found out my mother was raped, I went into the guest bedroom and I shut the door for 3 days. And my wife was like, "My God, come out!" And it was. So I never gave up on the career. I was almost ready to give up on life, and it was only because I thought I was more valuable to my family if I wasn't there. So as far as the career and the life, I was given a choice. A lot of times you hit rock bottom. They say hit rock bottom, and I'm going to tell you, for someone who has an addictive personality, whatever your addiction is, hitting rock bottom won't be losing your family, because gambling addicts lose their families all the time. Hitting rock bottom doesn't mean your wife's going to leave you. That happens all the time. So what ultimately is going to happen is that the rock bottom is when you have the stark choice. Literally, you have the stark choice between life and death that day. You're going to figure out that unless you change things, you will die, and it will happen very soon. That was the choice that I felt that I had to make. I really knew that my life would be over if something didn't happen. And I got healed overnight. I had tried to quit drinking in the past. I had DTs. I had been hospitalized twice with my blood pressure 160 over 110, my heart rate a $165, $170. When you try to quit drinking cold turkey, that happens. You can die. And I had to do that twice. I tried it twice. I had to go to the hospital. And one night, the next morning, I woke up, and it was gone. It was like I never had a drink. I didn't have to go to the hospital. I didn't remember the taste of alcohol. I didn't remember the taste of alcohol. It's crazy. It just happened. So, I don't know. I can't explain it. I believe that I've made a commitment to life and maybe inspiring people, and I think that I had something pretty miraculous happen. I like to say that God doesn't. I don't believe that God. I think God really helps you. Really, really helps you when you've given up. It's like God can kind of push you along. Come on, Rob, you can do this. But ultimately, when you're giving up, I think that I was lifted up and saved.
I think that's a real important truth, that when you surrender, God's there for you, and because He wants the glory, right? He doesn't want you after to talk about how you did it. He wants the glory for Himself. We don't have time to talk politics. Yeah, who cares, right?
Kevin McCarthy gets fired. What the hell? I don't care. I've got plenty of opinions on those things. Trust me, and you can listen to my show today if you want to hear that stuff.
But your story is just so inspirational and motivational, and I just want to finish with this one question, if you care to answer. What's your relationship with your biological mother now?
Well, she passed away a few years ago. I never got a chance to meet her. I did meet my half-sister, and her name is Patty, and she is a bit older than me. She's like in her early 70s, so she's about 15 years older than me, 16 years older than me. She grew up in Harlan, Iowa, near my home. An amazing thing happened is I found out. I did my DNA test on my birthday in October, and I literally got the test results on Christmas Day in 2018. And it was weird. I mean, it was Christmas Day. It wasn't supposed to come. Christmas Day, I get the results in email. Okay, so all of a sudden these cousins start popping up all over. I'm like, oh my God! And I find out one of my cousins was one of my classmates in high school. I mean, I never knew he was my first cousin. And so ultimately, I was invited up to my cousin's house in January, like January the 7th of 2019, in Maryville, where in Northwest Missouri State, where it's college. She went to college there too, and there were 70 or so of my relatives waiting for me because they knew that Patty had given up a son, and that the prodigal son returned. It was the most warm and beautiful thing I've ever experienced. And then I went to my biological family reunion this year, and that was remarkable. It was amazing. It was amazing to see how many people looked like my son, how many people looked like my son when they were kids. I don't look much like anybody, but it was really neat, and it was also really funny because this family, they literally existed 20 miles from my home. Wow. Where I grew up, and they're Catholic family, big Catholic family. It was funny because I went to St. Pat's Church, and right next door is the St. Pat's Rec Hall, and we did the reunion at a church in Panama. It was at St. John's or whatever, and we did the reception right there, the same kind of situation. It was really interesting. So my life wasn't it was substantially different, but it was, Southwest Iowa, big family, Catholic family. That's kind of, I thought was kind of interesting, but it's given me, like I said, it's given me a lot of ammunition for not only my beliefs being pro-life, and I'm not an absolutist on being pro-life, but it gave me a perspective on a lot of things that, I always like to say when you're a performer, you want to add to your currency. You add to the value of your currency. And so I became a comedy writer. I became a stand-up comedian part-time when I didn't do it full-time. Whatever, all these things that I do. And the same goes with my life. I've got this, I'm adding to the value of my currency when these things happen. So I had to sell cars for a living. That adds to my value of a currency. I beat alcohol abuse. That adds to the value of my currency. I find out that I'm adopted and my mother was sexually assaulted. That adds to the value of my currency in life, and maybe gives me some sort of perspective that can help people if they're going through the same things that I've been through.
That's such a wonderful, selfless way to look at it, and I commend you for being so open to discuss your personal life this way. I wonder if you could just answer this one last question. Are you planning on writing a book or on this experience, or what's next for you?
Well, you know what I was thinking of doing? I've had some people ask me if I want to write a book, and they always want me to do something political.
Right.
And I'm like, I know they sell. I know, great. Okay, Rob Carson's prescription for saving America.
Right.
I mean, honestly, who cares? What I want to do is what I'd like to do is I want to do a series of short essays, and I've got it titled, it's called The Blog Father. And I've been doing these essays, I call them audio blogs for years, and they're about life. You're about everything from dogs to kids to politics, and I've been doing them kind of in the background, and whenever I play one for people, they cry. So I want to put together a series of essays. I like to liken it to Steve Martin had a book in the 70s when I was a little boy. He was my idol. It was called Cruel Shoes, and it was a series of silly essays. What I'd like to start with is do something, maybe call it The Blog Father, and just feature these short essays. I guess you could, if you're going to compare them to something, it was, I don't know, a little mix of Charles Kuralt / Paul Harvey / whoever.
Page 2.
So I'm kind of thinking, I've been approached years ago by someone at a network, and they said, we want to make you the Charles Kuralt of Generation X. And I'm like, okay, let's go. And then, of course, it fell through like so many promises in broadcasting. So as far as something autobiographical, if I become that interesting to people, then I'll consider writing something like that, sharing my experiences in it. Absolutely.
Oh,
I don't know if it's interesting. I don't know if it's that interesting to people who now love.
Your story of overcoming struggle and adversity is definitely interesting. And I really want to thank you for coming on Bold and Blunt to talk about your personal story next time. And I'd love to have you back, and we can talk that politics and all that boring stuff if you want.
I don't care.
But
the thing is, my mother, God rest my beautiful mother, she taught me how to talk to anyone about anything. So if you want to talk about cold fusion, I'll do it a half hour with you. All right? If you want to talk about delightful summer salad recipes, I will talk to you for a half hour about it.
Oh, hey, let's make a show out of that. I'll just throw some topics at you, just random things, and we'll see what you come up with on the spot.
And I do, by the way, I have about 100 cooking videos on the web. That was another thing that I did to add to my currency. I learned how to cook. I'm not a chef, not even close, but I'm a pretty damn good cook.
Wow. What an interesting guy. And thank you. What an interesting discussion. Rob Carson, thank you so much for being on Bold and Blunt. I look forward to chatting with you soon.
Well, it's very nice to hear from a woman that I'm interesting who hasn't been drinking. That's fantastic.
It's always a plus, right? Thank you, Rob.
Hey, bless you. Thank you.
I love doing shows where you get to hear from people who have overcome adversity. That's the good stuff, right? If you like Bold and Blunt, don't forget you may get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, at washingtontimes.com, where you may also subscribe to my Monday, Wednesday, Friday newsletter. You can get Bold and Blunt at Real Life Network and, of course, wherever podcasts are offered. One quick reminder: protect your retirement. Diversify your savings and retirement accounts with physical gold and silver. American Hartford Gold. Its 5-star rating makes it a company you can trust. And don't forget, tell them I sent you, and they'll give you up to $5,000 of free silver on your first order. Call now, 866-525-4680, 866-525-4680, or text BOLD, that's BOLD, BOLD, to 65532. BOLD to 65532. Thank you for listening. Tune in next time. And in the meanwhile, don't forget, stay blunt, stay bold.